and welcome to PC Politics. I'm your host, Phyllis Coley. This show is sponsored by Spectacular Magazine. Spectacular Magazine is your community-focused resource, and we do all that we can to bring you all information. Here on PC Politics, we talk to candidates, we talk to politicians, voters, but most of all, we talk about issues, and that's our most important thing. This election season, 2020, we have more African American women running than we've ever seen before. Joining me now is a candidate for U.S. Senate from North Carolina, Erica Smith. Hi.
Hi.
And I am so honored to have you with me today.
We see this as an opportunity. Definitely happy to be here with you today.
Thank you. So there are many more black women running this year. What do you attribute that surge?
I believe that surge is because the more reason now to have representative democracy.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many issues that need to be tackled, particularly after this administration in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And the issues that are paramount now are equal justice, equal pay, equal access, equal opportunity. There are systemic issues with equity throughout every institution. And so more and more black women who have lived these experiences and understand it, how we can affect policy is driving us to run for these positions so we can have representation up and down the ballot in every body, every legislature, because our voices are critical, our voices are important.
And we have also worked to get a lot of people elected, and then after we work and they get in position, I don't know, somehow they forget about our issues.
Phyllis, I'm glad you said that because I myself worked my way up through every level of the Democratic Party for the last 14, 15 years. I've been working on campaigns to get great Democrats elected. Mm-hmm. In 2016, in my second term in the North Carolina Senate, I was unopposed in the primary. I was unopposed in the general election. But guess what? I didn't sit on the sidelines. I hired poll workers, 45 of them, so we can get strong progressive candidates elected up and down. As black women, we are the most faithful and loyal voting bloc. Mm-hmm. And we turn out and we show up for candidates, but all too often our agenda is left behind because we're not at the table to push it.
Exactly. It's about being at the table, but it's also like Shirley Chisholm said, if you don't have a seat at the table, then you pull up a folding chair. Bring your own chair. Now, as when you go to the Senate, even though they will have a chair for you, there'll only be two that, unless things change in this election, that are black women in the Senate. And you will be the only one. I don't think there's ever been a black woman from the South.
Well, first of all, these are some startling statistics. Mm-hmm. We have had 1,203 persons to serve in the United States Senate since our nation began. Mm-hmm. Of those 1,203, there have only been 10 African Americans. Of the 10 African Americans, it's been 2 black women. Carol Moseley Braun in 1992 from Illinois, yes, and Kamala Harris from California. As we know, the issues in the South, where we have systemic oppression left over from slavery in the institutions of Jim Crow, there is a different conversation that comes from the South when you're talking about our black boys and our black girls and the discrimination that they face from the school to prison pipeline to understanding what it means for us to have that battle cry for social justice and equity and equal pay and equal opportunity. Right. And so from the South, it's so important to have that voice at the table.
And as you're talking about issues, let's talk about some of the issues that are on your platform. Let's talk about health care. And I know, how do you feel about the Medicare for All?
Well, I'll start with this. I was a big supporter of the Affordable Care Act.
Okay.
But with these constant attacks and taking the teeth out of the Affordable Care Act, we realized it's not sustainable in terms of making sure everyone has access to health care. What I have navigated as a Black woman is our healthcare system. And having to navigate that system for a medically fragile child, it's very difficult to have these persistent injustices for the compromised standard of care for Black people as a whole through the healthcare system. We need a universal healthcare plan that encompasses everyone. For North Carolina, that will mean Medicaid expansion for 500,000 adults who fall in the gap. For me, it's a business argument. There's so many people, Phyllis, who stay trapped in a dead-end job. Why? Because they have health care benefits. There's so many small businesses that would like to raise the salaries for their employees, but guess what? They're doing all they can to cover health care benefits. So why don't we have an improved medical care, health care for all that doesn't deny people pre-existing conditions. It does not discriminate against people in their access to health care. It doesn't deny them important surgeries. We need to be able to have affordable prescriptions, and that's what health care means for me.
What about policies for progress? On your website, you talk about progress. And what do you mean? Explain that a little bit.
Okay, for progress, that means for environmental stewardship. We have to promote the environmental justice aspect, that Black and brown people are the most impacted from corporate pollution. We need a Green New Deal that bans fracking, that bans offshore drilling, that promotes zero carbon powered, get our emissions down by 2030, 100% renewable energy. We also need to look at the solar and wind jobs that pay above the minimum wage, $19 an hour, great jobs. So this is about worker justice. By progress, I mean, as a Black woman, I make 65 cents on the dollar of a white male. Latina women make 57 cents on the dollar of a white male. First American women only make 52 cents on the dollar of a white male. So progress means equal pay for equal work. Women make up 50% of the workforce, but yet we only command 60% of the salaries. And so it's very important as we're looking for progress. All people need to rise. They say that a rising tide floats all boats. It's time for all boats to be able to have a livable wage, to provide worker justice, to provide workplace protections, to provide opportunities through criminal justice reforms. That's progress.
What you talk about progress, what I haven't seen a lot of progress on is gun control legislation. What's your plan as far as to get some type of, and what kind of gun control legislation would you like to see?
I'd like to see gun regulation. There's bipartisan support for universal background checks to be able to have the 10-day waiting period to make sure that guns are not getting into the hands of the wrong people. We also need to understand red flag laws. There are times when people who have a right to hold a gun are a threat to themselves or a threat to society. We need to be able to implement some common sense protections so that when there is a crisis, guns can be removed from the people who have permits and properly permitted but are not safe for the public. We also need to provide some appropriations for mental health care, be able to make a robust crime monitoring, cybersecurity monitoring. We know that in the El Paso shooter, that shooter was identified to have issues and to be in possession of rapid fire gun, an assault rifle, and his mom called the police, but they didn't intervene. We need to ban assault rifles and rapid fire ammunition. And so those are just a few things that make sense, that are very easy to implement, and they've been shown in the past to be very effective in reducing the amount of mass shootings.
We talked about Black women running, I think generally, and you talked about, just in general running as far as representing Black people, but tell me your personal, why is this so important to you to become the senator from North Carolina?
This is so important to me, Phyllis, is because this is something that we have been working for the last 17 years. I was a Congressional Black Caucus Institute Fellow, and what that was a political boot camp that taught you how to move from grassroots leadership to local leadership to state leadership before congressional leadership. During this time, I've been out here paying dues, I've been learning the rules, and I've been gaining the tools to be an effective policymaker. It's essential that we send people of goodwill to Capitol Hill. It's so important. The 2020 election, I am running because I know I am the most qualified candidate. I am the candidate who not only fires up our base with our most loyal voting bloc, that's Black women, but I energize the millennials. I have a platform that speaks to them. I close the rural-urban divide, working my way up from picking cucumbers on a farm in Northampton County to being a corporate engineer in Seattle, Raleigh, Arlington. Yeah, look at the experience. I'm the most qualified, but more than that, I will return humanity, integrity, and common sense advocacy to Washington, D.C. We are a people-powered movement. We carry the voices, and our motto has been one of us for all of us. It's time for us to have a voice at the table and to get America working for us again. We make America work.
Before we started interviewing, I asked you what was on your schedule for today, and you said, well, from this hour to this hour, I'm returning phone calls. Will that be the same thing when you get to Washington?
Absolutely. I believe in inclusion, fusion politics, making sure that people know what's going on. We may not always agree on my vote, but let's talk about why I voted this way, and let's see if we can get an understanding. I have served successfully 3 terms in the North Carolina Senate by building a coalition, and that coalition knows that we will carry the voice of those who are not heard. We regularly have our town halls, we return phone calls, I answer my own phone, and I don't relegate that to staff to push people off. What we do is we listen to the voices. How are we going to represent the voices if we don't listen to them? So that is very big in our platform. That's what we've always been doing for the last 17 years.
And I can attest to that. Thank you so much. I mean, when we were looking to book her for the show, I wasn't sent to a scheduler. I got her on the phone, and I'm just saying, we don't endorse candidates, but I do want you to look at the amount of African American women that are running this year, and if they align with what's important to you, then please look for that. But most importantly, we want you to vote. Thank you. Thank you so much for today. Listen, you've been watching PC Politics. My guest today is Erica Smith, who is a candidate for U.S. Senate. I'm Phyllis Coley, and until next time, see ya.
Spectacular Magazine. We on the scene.